Welcome to Like-Minded with Dr. Patrice. Each episode, we'll sit down with different types of experts and unpack the role of mental health in our day-to-day lives. Today, I'm talking with Val Kaplan, the founder and CEO of Coven, a new digital platform designed to empower women through their journey of divorce. Inspired by her own experience and the evident lack of resources, Val is on a mission to transform this life transition into a moment of strength and opportunity. Coven offers trusted content, an authentic community, and access to world-class experts addressing the variety of challenges women face during divorce. Before launching Coven, Val served as Chief Marketing Officer for Headspace and Pluto TV and was an influential executive at Hulu and HBO, where she played a key role in driving significant growth for these iconic brands. Her strategic acumen was further demonstrated during her tenure as an operating partner at TCG, where she leveraged her extensive industry knowledge to foster innovation and growth. Welcome, Val. Okay, so let's start with your story. What was your personal experience with divorce, and what inspired you to turn that into a mission to build community for other women?
Yeah, so I got divorced about 5 years ago now. It was 2020.
Okay.
Height of COVID. So you think you had a bad year.
Yeah.
And at the time, my daughter was just about 2 years old. And, I sort of lovingly refer to COVID as the great accelerator in a lot of ways. But I think particularly in relationships, it maybe didn't necessarily create new problems, but it really exacerbated and highlighted the ones that were there.
Absolutely.
So I found myself at this moment where, I had never planned on divorce. I had never hoped for a divorce. I, for a long time, couldn't even say the word out loud because it just wasn't an option where I came from. But I knew I was in a marriage that wasn't working. And I sort of looked out at the next 16 years of my daughter's life and didn't think I could make it and felt like, okay, if this isn't going to last, I'd rather end it now when she's young, when this is all she'll ever know, when she doesn't have to go through the loss of the family unit.
Yes.
And so I felt really motivated to do it sooner rather than later, as soon as I knew it wasn't there. But like I said, for me, divorce hadn't been an option.
Yeah. Tell me about that. When you say, from where I came from, the divorce was an option, what do you mean by that?
Well, I can tell you broadly in the U.S., the divorce rate right now is at 56%. Shockingly high.
It's really high. I think for whatever reason, a lot of people have that number 50% stuck in their head. So the idea that 50% seemed like a lot, and now it's risen, without us realizing it.
Shockingly high.
Yeah.
But 5 years ago in my community, in my world, it certainly was not. I got divorced on the earlier side. I was relatively young. And just in my community and my family, people stayed together, and they weren't all necessarily happy marriages, but they were long marriages.
Yes. So whether it was explicit or implicit, you got the message that you just stick around.
Yes.
Don't worry about being happy. Don't worry about, how that feels to you, but you stay together.
Success was staying together.
I see.
And I was a highly successful person. And so, you asked sort of what inspired me to start Coven, and that was a huge piece of it because I reflect on my own experience, and I had amazing friends and family. I had a great community. I had a big career. I made good money. I consider myself a pretty brave and independent person. And even for me, with all of those skills and all of that privilege, I could barely bring myself to A, decide to leave a marriage that wasn't working, and then B, figure out how to do it and how to do it well.
Yes.
And so I feel so innately that if it was that hard for me, imagine how many other women are out there in a similar position and feel like they don't even have the option.
Well, and I think also, if you think about being brave as a person and deciding to leave a marriage during COVID, and with a 2-year-old, those are two reasons probably why a lot of people stayed together maybe longer than they should have. So to even through all of that, for you to decide, no, I want to build a different life for myself and for my child, it does take a lot of bravery to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did your community receive the news that you were getting a divorce?
Oof. It's a big question.
Yeah.
It was mostly very positively in
Mm.
a surprising way.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, let me reword that maybe. Not that they necessarily received it
Okay.
positively, but that I was positively surprised in how they showed up for me.
Oh.
And, everyone has their own reactions for
Mhm.
sure. And I'd say 90% of them were extremely supportive. They were sad for me and they were
Mm.
scared for me, but they also showed up and stood by my side and held my hand as much as they could. I'd say the few people who had more palpably negative
Mhm.
reactions, I came to learn pretty quickly that said more about them than it did about me.
Right. Right.
And when you share your divorce, when you share that your marriage is ending, it triggers things for other people
Mhm.
who either have their own insecurities in their own relationships or their own feelings about yours. And I learned very quickly not to take that personally.
Yes.
So the 10% who sort of weren't able
Mhm.
to show up, I didn't let that get to me. But the 90% who did, it was such a pleasant surprise because I think of all the things I was most afraid of
Mhm.
when I made that scary decision.
Yes.
It was, okay, I'm going to lose my marriage. I'm going to lose my husband.
Mhm.
Am I also going to lose everybody else with it?
Right. Yes.
And one of the biggest, sort of unexpected blessings of the
Mhm.
experience is not only did I not lose those people, but those relationships became all the more authentic and genuine and deep and real. And when you
Yeah.
go through something that's so undeniably vulnerable,
Mhm.
other people show up that way back to you.
Yeah, I think, the way you're describing it, Val, like divorce is one of those things where you have to deal with your own feelings of like maybe disappointment and
Mhm.
fear.
Mhm.
And then other people have that too, right?
Mhm.
When in other kinds of situations where, if we lose something that is important to us, often it's our own feelings and then people can show up for you. But
Mhm.
this, as you're describing it, and I understand what you're saying, it unlocks some issues that they might have on their
Oh
own.
yeah.
So whether it's a feeling like, oh, I wish I had had the strength to get divorced or like to get out of this unhappy relationship, or I'm, feeling judgment about anyone who decides to get divorced. It's their own stuff as well, and so navigating
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
how were you able to do that and not knowing what the response was going to be?
Oh gosh, it was really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard, and I was so lost at the beginning. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of people in
Mhm.
my family or in my
Yes.
community who had been there before. Where I was literally picking up the phone and calling random friends of friends who had been divorced. Like that's all we had in common. They had
Yeah.
been divorced,
Yeah.
but I was just so hungry for someone who could relate, who could give me hope, who could give
Mm.
me basic pieces of advice of where to start. And I found a few of those.
Yeah.
And again, like we have pretty much nothing in common other than the fact that we've been through divorce. But in
Mhm.
those early days, it was really critical for me to sort of figure out how to start putting some of those stakes in the ground.
Yes.
And then I think with my personal friends and family, it just sort of the entire experience for me became one of those like jump into the fire moments
Mm.
of burn away the trappings of life around you, and what's left behind is
Yes.
your core self and
Yes.
your authentic self.
Right.
And so as my authenticity became clearer
Mhm.
and crystal clear over time, the relationships that came along for the ride were a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you think about trappings, I think, those kind of trappings of success, like what does a successful life look like?
Yeah.
Especially if that's what you've been working towards and you've achieved it, in the way that you expect to, in the way that maybe like society expects you to,
Yeah. Yeah.
then in that way, in that really powerful way, deciding, actually, I'm not going to hold on to just what this idea of success
Yeah.
looks like to other people. Like I'm going to do something that feels genuine to me in my soul.
Well, I think honestly, that was kind of my aha moment was
Yeah.
like, I had stuck the landing. Like
You really have.
I
If
had,
you just stay there, everything is cool.
I had stuck the landing on that life, that life that I
Yeah.
thought would
Mhm.
bring me joy and happiness and success, from the marriage to the house to
Yeah,
the
the
career
kid.
to the
Yeah. Yeah,
kids.
you were
Like,
doing it.
engaged at 28, married at 29, kid at 32. Like I did it. And I wasn't happy and I wasn't fulfilled and I didn't feel seen and I didn't feel present.
Yeah.
And so, that was the moment to jump into the fire because instead of seeking joy by sort of all these external achievements, I had to figure out how to find joy by going deep within.
You said you weren't happy, and so even though COVID probably accelerated everything, also the stress of having a young child, all of those things. You're not the only person who got divorced during COVID.
Oh no.
It definitely shed some light on a lot of issues that were already there. But how did you know even before that point that you weren't happy, that you weren't satisfied? It wasn't going to be enough for you, this relationship. What were your signs?
I don't know if I was aware while it was happening. I sort of, from my experience, it was one of these like a small drip, and like you're fine until suddenly you're not.
Yes.
And I think that small drip for me was almost this quiet sense of losing myself and losing myself in the motions of this perfect life.
Yeah.
And it was very subtle and it was very small until it
wasn't
piled up and it wasn't. And obviously COVID added to that for sure. But it was this kind of emptiness where I felt more like a vessel for the life than sort of like my soul.
Yeah, I think that's such a perfect way to describe it, and maybe without COVID, there wouldn't have been the same time to reflect.
Yeah.
And who knows, like you could have carried on longer because it's just like busy. You're doing the stuff. Everyone's like society is reinforcing that like you're doing it, Val. Everything is going great. So just keep at it.
Well, let me tell you what COVID did give me is a lot of time to reflect after we split up. we split in October of 2020. Ooh. And so that second lockdown in that winter, I remember I'd be like sitting at home alone, either after my daughter had gone to bed or and I was like, all I want to do is like go out and drink with my girlfriends and I couldn't.
Stop reflecting.
It was a lot of forced healing. Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah.
So you were starting to talk about, reaching out to friends of friends.
Yeah.
And kind of building this community with people that you had one thing in common, like one major thing.
Yeah.
What kind of conversations did you have early on that has like inspired what you're building with Coven?
Well, so I probably had 2 or 3 that were really formative for me, where I just got a few nuggets of advice that quite frankly shaped the trajectory of my divorce and thereafter. My favorite piece of advice, which I like to share a lot, is I was speaking to a friend of a friend, and he said to me, it was literally like 3 days after we split when I was in the like, what is divorce?
Yes.
What do I do? Do I need to get a lawyer yesterday?
What does this mean for my life?
Right, because it's not just your marriage is ending, it's your whole entire life that was built around it is changing. So I had this conversation with a friend of a friend, and he was like, okay, you need to think of it like 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years. And you have a different job in each of those time periods. So you're in the 4 weeks, and your job for the first 4 weeks is literally just survive, just get through. So breathe, take care of yourself, don't have a panic attack, just get through it because it's a shock. And, I think I clearly knew that in that moment, which is why I was, reaching for help anywhere I could find it. But to just sort of recognize like you are in a trauma, you are in a massive life transition. And then the next stage is 4 months. And he was like, okay, this is the phase when you're going to start putting some stakes in the ground for what your new life is going to look like. And you're starting to build this new normal. And whether it's figuring out where you're going to live or what your custody schedule looks like, or just what are your new routines. And, you're used to eating most meals with another person. You're used to sharing chores and errands and a household. All of that's going to change. So you spend sort of those next 4 months figuring out what are the foundational pieces of your new life post-divorce going to look like.
Yes.
And then the 4 years, phase 3, is really just living that and going through those motions. And while you're doing that, you're grieving, you're negotiating a settlement, you're doing a lot of other things. There's going to be ups and downs. But as you live that, he's like, you're going to wake up at the end of 4 years and you're going to turn around and be the happiest you've ever been.
Wow.
And
now you at 4 years.
Now,
what do you say?
I mean, I gotta say, like, I give this advice a lot because it was almost to a T.
That is interesting.
It was almost to a T. And I just found it so helpful to give me this framework to both understand A, how hard it was gonna be, but also B, that it was gonna be totally worth it.
Yes.
And now on the other side, I can say, yes, it was, and I can share that and pass that along with other people.
And I mean, how powerful to, like, because when you're going through something, you need to share it with people.
Yeah.
And then you also, depending on what it is, you probably also need hope.
Yeah,
you know, and like maybe
exactly.
even like a bit of a roadmap, even if it's not, you know, specific. It's like you can see someone who's been through the exact same kind of pain that you have, and you've seen them on the other side. So you know that you can make it, that people do make it, you know, especially when you come from a place where people don't get divorced and mostly stay together. Sometimes, you know, we don't know if are we going to be okay? You know what I think about, Val, is, you know, when you're young and you have like your first breakup and you like feel like you're gonna die and you're like 14. I'm like,
I remember.
I'm never gonna make it past this. I'm gonna love this person forever. And then you get to the like to a point, like, I mean, at my age, I'm like, I don't even remember their last name. Like, obviously I got through it, but when you're in it, it's so hard to know that you are going to be okay. And so seeing someone who has been through it and is like, I know exactly where you are right now. That is real. And this is your only job. I mean, also what like release to know I just have to survive right now. I don't have to I don't have to figure out my whole life, especially, you know, if you're like an achiever or like ambitious, you know, it can be hard probably to like slow that down.
Completely. Yeah. So when I was going through my divorce, I had a few people who did that for me. And then now on the other side of it, I joke I've kind of become the divorce whisperer of Culver City because everybody sends their friends to me.
Really?
And so I probably talk to a woman twice a month.
Really?
Who is a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend who is in this moment of like, I'm doing this. Where the fuck do I even start?
Yeah.
And I, you know, I give them a few of my nuggets, not too much because you don't want to overwhelm at first. But it's really just sort of like paying forward and passing along those lessons that were learned the hard way and letting them know they're not alone, right?
Absolutely.
Millions of people have done this before. Millions of people are doing this right now. But you feel, because of the shame and the stigma and the sense of failure, you feel alone and you feel isolated. And it makes something that's inherently really difficult even harder than it needs to be.
Yes.
Which is exactly why I'm starting Coven, right? Is, you know, I do this sort of one-to-one in my own neighborhood, but Coven is just a way to scale that of bringing women together at this moment. So instead of feeling alone, they can feel belonging and empowerment and face a life transition as an opportunity for growth and transformation versus this just sort of crisis.
Well, and I think what I love about what you're building too is that it gives people like that kind of hope that we're talking about, you know, that belief that you will get to the other side, but also space to have their own journey.
Yes.
So it's not like it's going to look exactly like this. Although I think the 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years is really, really great advice. You know, I think that also it's like, it's not going to be exactly the same. For example, like we've talked about, if you have children or if you don't have children, that's a very different journey. So how do you walk people through that? You know, because if you have children, obviously this is probably someone who's going to be in your life for a very long time. Versus if you don't, and it's a different kind of split.
Oh, completely. A lot more complicated. So what we're doing at Coven to solve it from a business perspective is we're basically building these cohorts or these covens of women to go through their divorce together. So on average, it takes about 3 years from the decision point of I want to leave this marriage to actually finalizing the settlement. That's a long
3 years is a long time.
It's a long journey and it's a hard journey.
Yes.
And so to have, you know, 5 or 6 other women to go through it with who are in similar circumstances based off of geography. Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Are you the breadwinner? Stage of divorce? How long have you been married? Because like you said, every divorce is unique. Every relationship is unique. But there is sort of a common arc to it. And to have this group of women who are kind of trusted strangers, where you have anonymity, where you don't trigger sort of that personal interaction, yet at the same time you see each other, and you get it, and you can vent about whatever you know interaction you're having with your ex, and that other person might not have shared it, but they get it, and they get the complexity and the tension. So that's really how we're thinking about it from a business perspective. I will say, you know, from the personal perspective, the co-parenting piece, the sharing a child with your ex, in my experience, is both the most difficult and the most important piece of it.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, I think particularly as moms, like we're all born, or maybe not born. When our kids are born, we develop, the mom guilt.
Yes.
And there's
it's immediate.
It's
It kicks
immediate,
in with the hormones.
and some of it's nature. I think some of it is also nurture. I think we're told that being a good mom is self-sacrifice. I have reprogrammed myself through my divorce. I have a daughter. So instead of looking at self-sacrifice as the paradigm of good motherhood, I like to ask myself, what would I want her to do?
Yes.
Because I actually think kids learn by example more
100%.
than anything else. So that gives me not only the permission, but the obligation to take care of
And sometimes
myself.
we need that kind of reframe, you know, like always thinking about like we are modeling for someone else. So we're either modeling the way, like a good thing that we want them to take on or something. And it's not really so much what we say, right? To your point, it's the way that we behave. So if you are taking time for yourself, you know, and you know, self-care and that kind of thing, you know, like in the moment, having like trusted friends and building this community, you may not be able to say yes to everything with your daughter, but she's seeing that like, oh, like mom matters to herself. I want to be like that. I'm going to matter to myself. I'm going to prioritize myself and like my care. And, you know, and I think that it's much more powerful message when they see you actually modeling that behavior.
Yeah. And do you know what logistically helps me do that is shared custody.
Right.
You know, I'll be really honest, like that was obviously not a motivating factor for the divorce by any means, but it is a silver lining. And, you know, I sort of have less time with my daughter, but the time that I do have with her is only quality. Like I show up how I want to be. I'm so present. I'm the mother that I've always wanted to be with her. We couldn't be closer. So it's like 100% quality 50% of the time versus, you know, 50% quality 90% of the time.
Absolutely.
And so I make the most of my time with her. And then the time that I don't have her, I get to be a full-fledged
person.
Yes.
You get to still be Val and not just like Val, the parent.
Yes. And I can pursue these big dreams and the big career and the community and the friendships and the fun and really sort of have both parts of myself really fulfilled.
I feel like that's such a powerful message for people who have, you know, exes where it's like, okay, they're a good parent and, you know, that's fine, to look at it differently, because I think sometimes, you know, especially like in those early stages, so many decisions are made out of like emotion versus legit. So you're like, oh, I want my kids full time because maybe I'm mad at this other person, or, you know, I don't trust them, you know, whether that's, you know, valid or not. But you're making that decision, and now you're totally like coming from a different place of saying it allows me to show up differently because my child's safe. She's living her life, and I can also remember who I am. Especially, I think when you were saying earlier, you like lost a lot of yourself before, you know, and so being able to have actually that time and space to go back to you is really powerful.
Yeah, and also for the other parent as well. You know, my daughter's father is an incredible dad, and quite frankly, he's even better now after we've split. And I, you know, our split certainly changed the dynamic of parenting in the home. I think when we were together, we sort of fell into the very common trap of like, I did a lot of the heavy lifting of like the work.
The emotional labor.
And he, you know, he was fun dad who got to like come in for an hour here or there and make her laugh while I'm like, what?
You're like, someone help me, please.
And the dynamic really shifted after we split up. And he really just stepped it up in an incredible way. And my relationship with her and my dynamic with her is healthier and more balanced than it's ever been. And so is his. You know, and I look at a lot of, you know, my daughter's in first grade now. And so I look at a lot of her friends and their family dynamics. And, you know, I'll be clear, I think the health and happiness of the child has nothing to do with whether the parents are still together, right? I think 100%. Our dynamic is pretty clearly like a lot healthier than a lot of other ones that I see. But I think, again, sort of this as a parent and as a mother, you have this sense of like keeping it all together. And sometimes it's that holding it all together that's preventing us from seeing another way of doing things that could actually be better for us. For all.
I think, you know, like when I'm working with couples, you know, I often hear, or just, you know, even with other people that I'm talking to casually outside of work, we're staying together for the kids.
Yeah.
And it's like,
no.
kids are really, really smart. Kids, they're very smart. If you've ever met a kid, they're very smart. They know when there's tension or unhappiness or dissatisfaction in the home. And that does not, feel good to them.
Yeah.
So for a child to have two happy parents separate versus in the house, like thinking about that kind of old school way of looking at relationships and what it's supposed to be versus how the children are really affected. Because, you talk to a lot of kids whose parents either got divorced or didn't get divorced, and they say, I wish my parents would have split up.
Yeah.
They were miserable. And so then it made the household miserable, know, and to have that kind of different perspective, on really, if you're doing it for the kids, then how are you doing it for the kids? What is really the impact on the children going to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll admit, I was one of those. I recently lost my mom, but my parents were married for over 50 years before then. But it was not the marriage I wanted. And in fact, I saw it. And I think that was part of when I made the decision to leave my marriage. I sort of saw this one path that felt like it would have been a very long and stifling life. And then the other path was completely uncharted and unknown and terrifying. But I took the leap to sort of go and make it mine. Yeah.
So let's talk about making decisions from like an emotional point of view.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the biggest learnings I had in my own divorce experience, and one of the biggest pieces of advice I try to pass on is that in those early days of divorce or deciding to get divorced, it's so easy to fall into this trap of fear-based thinking. And you have to make some big decisions. But if you make them for the wrong reasons, it can have really consequential impact down the road, financially, emotionally, on your kids' lives.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's part of why, trying to build something that can provide emotional support to help you regulate, to help you calm, to help you make choices from a position of power and thoughtfulness that are aligned with your long-term goals and values versus just fear. Will help for better outcomes for everybody, and I think that's part of the problem with divorce today is it's been made out to be sort of this big scary monster. I call it like Voldemort. It's like he who
People
shall
don't
not
want
be
to talk about it. Yes,
if you say it out loud, you're going to get divorced. People also think it's contagious. So because it's been built out to be this big scary thing, when it happens, you go into this sort of fight or flight or freeze mode. And they tell you not to make big life decisions when you're in emotional crisis, but that's the definition of what divorce is. So how can we instead de-escalate the emotional crisis and give people the tools and the support systems to make smarter, calmer decisions that will impact the rest of their lives?
Absolutely. And I think, that community that people will have access to, like with Coven, it also, in a way, like I'm thinking about how it helps them preserve their other relationships. Because if people are afraid of the idea of divorce and don't want to talk about it or have big feelings about what you are doing in your life, that can really be destabilizing to those relationships, right? And so, and also maybe if people haven't been through it, maybe they don't know what to say. I don't know if some, people might just like kind of steer clear because they don't know like the right way to comfort someone who's going through it. So to be able to have people who are like, I'm in it. So the fear, yes, we have fear, but not fear of doing it. Like I've made the decision and now I need support in some way. People who understand, people who maybe are exactly where I am or maybe a little bit ahead or a little bit behind, but a community of people who get it. And I imagine that probably during the process and afterwards to be able to have relationships with other people who aren't able to fulfill those needs for you, can let those relationships stay where they are, right? And then you have this community too.
Exactly. Because those other relationships in your life are hugely important and will continue to be so. But like you said, they might not necessarily get it if they haven't lived in your shoes, if they have their own sort of triggered reactions. So to have this safe space that is both well-informed and also sort of low risk to disrupting the rest of your life is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I imagine people probably still remain close after that time, but
Yeah.
there's not the pressure. It's not like you're going to family dinner
Yeah.
and you need to either act like everything's okay, or like you're afraid you're going to break down, with people who, maybe might not be in a position to comfort you or to be there for you,
Yeah.
And kind of like thinking along that line, what is your advice for people if they have friends or family who are going through divorce and they don't know what to say and they are, afraid to say the wrong thing? What do you recommend? How can people be supportive?
I think my biggest piece of advice would be to listen and be curious and really follow their lead. So to try to do your best not to project your own feelings and your own reactions onto it, like we were talking about. Like my pet peeve, when I was going through this and I was telling everyone that I was getting divorced, my pet peeve was when people would be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," and obviously well intended.
Yes.
But I'd come into the conversation. I'm like, am I showing up like that? Like
that's
like it's this
interesting.
huge tragedy. Like yes, it is sad, and yes, it is hard. But sort of the overreaction and sort of the over sympathizing and pity almost made it worse and made it feel heavier than I wanted it to. So I really appreciated it when it was more balanced. Like, I'm so sorry, but I'm proud of you for doing what you need to do.
Yes.
And I think for the people who could sort of take a moment to read my energy, to hear what I was saying, to see that this was actually a brave moment of empowerment for me versus some horrible tragedy that happened to me, then the response is a little different. And so I think that's where, the advice to listen and respond instead of projecting is sort of front and center.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, even, you ask someone like, "Oh, how are you doing?"
Yeah.
And then you let them tell you how they're doing, right? Because to your point, maybe someone does feel like this was the worst tragedy, or if you're blindsided or it wasn't your decision, right? There's all kinds of different things that come into it. But when you have made an empowered decision, it almost like minimizes that for someone to make it something that happened to you. And you're like, no, I actually thought really long and hard and made a tough choice for me, but the right choice for me.
But you make a good point. Every situation is different. Every experience is different. So I think just showing up to witness that and to receive that is the best thing a friend can do.
Absolutely. Okay, I think it's really helpful because you and I have talked, like sometimes when people just don't know the right thing to say, they just don't say anything. And then if you're already feeling isolated or like, I don't know what's going to happen in my life or with these relationships, it can emphasize that if people, stand back a little bit, even if they're doing it because they want to do the right thing, it can feel like the opposite, you know? And so I think for people, giving them some kind of ideas of this is what you can say. This is how you can, notice how the other person's showing up in the room and then respond to that. Versus probably a lot of those kinds of responses are just ingrained in us in society. It's like, okay, this is something terrible. Let me say something the way that I would if something tragic happened. You know?
And I think like showing that empathy and that care is never a bad thing. But doing it in a way where you can receive the other person's energy and follow their lead.
Absolutely.
And to your point, like try not to shy away from it. That doesn't mean you have to insert yourself, but don't shy away from it. And don't shy away from them because they're gonna need support and friendship and company more than ever. And so even the simple things of like, hey, do you want to grab a coffee and go on a walk? And it doesn't have to be like talk about the divorce. It's just it's the physical embodiment of I am here for you while you're going through something.
I'm wondering, like, if on the flip side of people kind of withdrawing, if you also see people who then want to be supportive, but then end up trying to like fix things. Like, let me give you all the advice and tell you exactly what to do. Like, do you see that happen as well?
I've certainly seen that happen. I thought you were going to go in a different direction too.
Well, let's go in that direction too after this.
Do you know how many people come to me and tell me they want to get divorced when they really just want to bitch about their husband?
Oh, well, hold on. Let's talk about that. So why do you think that happens?
I mean, listen, I think it's part of that. Like I did something vulnerable. I did, went through something vulnerable publicly. So now I'm a safe space.
Ah.
And while I appreciate that and I like that kind of friendship, I'm like, I'm also not your therapist.
Exactly.
That's what they go to. That's what they need to go to you for. But I think it's interesting. You know, it's a fine line, right? Because obviously, someone who's going through a journey like I did, I'll be there in a heartbeat to sort of help guide and go through. But there's also a difference between venting in a relationship and choosing whether or not to leave it.
Right.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very
And that's
different.
also something that like no friend can help you make that decision.
Yes. Yes, I think that's true. And, it kind of goes back to what we were saying about protecting, the relationships.
Exactly.
Right. By having people who are actually going through this thing.
Yes.
And it's fine, right? In friendships, there's space for complaining and that kind of thing. But
Always.
it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Because I can't fix it for you, you know? And so it is something that you need to do on your own.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Okay. So that happens to you.
Yes.
And then tell me if you see also the fixing and how people, that you work with, how they respond to that. If someone's trying to give advice and telling them exactly what to do.
So I think that is actually sort of the most extreme and worst manifestation of those 10% of people who have their own things triggered.
Interesting.
So it's usually either a family member, like a parent,
yes,
who feels like they have a vested interest in this, and like you're not just blowing up your life, you're blowing up mine.
Right, exactly.
So I've certainly seen a lot of those cases, or it's someone, whether it's like a friend or a sibling, who is maybe has enough insecurity in their own marriage that if you were to completely change your life and show that as an option, it gives them the sort of intense fear that could happen to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can imagine that, because I think probably with the parents, like, there's the parental instinct to protect.
Yeah.
So, if something's wrong, let me fix it. And I can't maybe go into like the emotional part of it or the reasons why I just need you to be okay.
Yeah.
Like that's my main thing as a parent. I need you to be okay. So let me give you a list of things to do, and whether maybe some of it's helpful, maybe some of it's not. But that says more about what their needs are. Like they need you to be okay.
Yeah.
However that is supposed to look like to them, right? And I think probably the same thing happens when there's people who are in vulnerable relationships, and they need you to be okay too, because
for them.
Right, exactly. It's not really about what you need. And I think it's so interesting, Val, that you're able to see that 10% is about them and their own stuff.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, even like through disappointment or fear that we might have, we can kind of get out of our own way and be there for the person we care about.
Yeah.
But if we have so much of that, and it's bringing out insecurities and like challenges within ourselves, it's harder to get out of the way. It's harder to see the person in front of you and what they actually need.
Completely. And what I always find fascinating too is like nobody is getting divorced for fun.
No one's going into marriage being like, oh, I can't wait till I get divorced. It's going to be so great.
Let me tell you, if you are at the point where you're telling someone I'm leaving my marriage, you have tried everything. And whether it's been public or out loud or just inside yourself, like it is, especially if children are involved, it is one of the hardest things you can do in life. And so if you're taking that leap to do it, then hopefully the people who know you well and the people who love you should trust that you feel like you have to.
Yes.
And so I think
so.
if they can't see that, then it really speaks to something else, right? And really speaks to their own insecurities and fears. And I think it's really tough to manage those relationships because you want those people who are close to you to sort of stand by your side. But I think there's also a moment where like you got to do what you got to do. And if that means setting some boundaries or taking some distance, do what you need to do. And once they realize it's happening and the train has left the station, I think that's when you then have the opportunity to sort of rebuild in a different way that is based off of this new sort of authentic life and authentic path that you're on.
Yeah. Let's talk about boundaries, because as a therapist, I love boundaries. So tell me about what kind of boundaries you see people needing to set, and that you can, help people like along that journey, because, lots of times people are not great at that. It's a skill that we have to learn, you know? And so, especially when relationships are changing, or maybe we don't they're fluid. We don't know where it's going to net out.
Yeah.
You know, how do you advise people to set boundaries or to know which boundaries they need to set in their own situation?
Yeah, I think the trickiest boundaries are probably boundaries with an ex, especially if it's a co-parent.
Yes.
So we were talking about this earlier, but if you share children with your partner, the relationship is not ending.
Yes, that's right.
The relationship is going to last forever,
yes.
and it's just going through a very painful, difficult transition. And I think particularly in sort of those first stages, call it, you know, like the first year or so of divorce, because you're simultaneously going through an emotional breakup, and all of that processing and pain and healing that comes with that. You are learning how to co-parent, which is a completely different muscle than however you were doing things before. And thirdly, you are negotiating a financial and legal settlement.
Yes. Yes.
And each of those in itself is pretty brutal, and all three at once.
With the emotional part of it,
oh my God, it's a lot. Yes. But I point that out to just point out that it will never be harder than it is in that moment. And once you start to sort of put those pieces to bed, you then get to a place where all you have to worry about is the co-parenting. So once sort of the emotional processing is done, once you signed the decree and that's behind you, then you can focus on, okay, who are we as parents to our child who we both love more than anything in the world. And that can be a beautiful thing. And, you know, none of it is easy, but I think that's where like the right boundaries can really enable a really healthy partnership.
Yes.
And, you know, I'll use myself as an example is we have a better parenting partnership than we ever did before.
Because the responsibilities are clearer.
I'd say it's a combination of the responsibilities are clearer, but it's not like we didn't do some kind of crazy fair play spreadsheet where like here's the 100 things he does, here's what we do. We don't have that.
That's good.
But I think just inherently the shared custody means that we have to like trust each other more because she is alone with one of us almost all of the time. And so the other person is making decisions on our behalf.
Yes.
And then we also have to like participate together more. So we have to make joint decisions more. Whereas the ironic thing is like when you have two parents in one household, it's almost easier to just have like a default decisioning parent because the other one's around. So I'll say he because it's usually he. So he kind of knew and he signed off and he enabled.
Yeah, exactly.
But
You're not
like,
checking in and like making sure you're on the same page. You're kind of going with it.
Whereas now, like we are forced to have a really active partnership because we're each responsible for her when she's with us, but we're also both responsible together for making, you know, any important decision. So we communicate a lot. We've been doing co-parenting coaching literally since we split up, which I feel like parents should do when they're together, quite frankly.
You know what? So much would come to light if people did that.
God. As soon as we started, I was like, gosh, we really should have done this a long time ago. Because it just, you know, it's a good structure to help us. It helped us like articulate what is our family? Like now that we're not just sort of like the default normal, what is our family? What are our values? How are we going to make these difficult decisions? What are we going to prioritize? How are we going to address conflict about those decisions when they arise? Again, really, you know, healthy things you would want to think about in any family structure.
And being that intentional about the way that you're making decisions, right? And so there's also consistency for your child. You know, knowing obviously you're two different people, but that there is an implicit agreement about what we're going to do and like whether it's the values we have and the things that like we champion in our household. And I just really appreciate the way that you are explaining that because I think that you're right. I think a lot of people, most people, like you end up in a default kind of, you know, situation. And we don't have to be so intentional about it because they're like, oh, they know. It's fine. I always make this decision about that. And you're really like, it's much more empowering in a way to be able to be like, no, like, let's actually think about these things. Let's talk about it. And then we can show it's like a united front in separate homes. Like, you know, it's really interesting.
Yeah. And listen, we don't parent exactly the same. There are certainly differences between our homes, but like the core values, we are very deliberate and intentional about. And then the things that are different, it's also taught me to just appreciate that. And like we were always different parents, whether we were in the same house or not. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, my daughter gets different things from each of us. And that's just fine. You know, the same way that I sort of have a compartmentalized life of like my time with her and my time without, she has a bit of that as well. But both are really solid and really healthy sort of attachment and support on both sides and both houses for her.
Yeah. I think it's really amazing, you know, the reframe that you're able to give people and the community that you're able to build in Coven. It's obviously needed. We're talking 56% of the population, you know, and so it's really key that you've been able to do that. If people want to find out more about Coven and about what you're working on, how can they find you?
They can find us at covendivorce.com or follow us on Instagram at coven.divorce. And yeah, just to learn a lot more about the content that we offer, the community. You know, I think the main goal you were touching on is that to redefine success, right? Success is not staying in a marriage that isn't working. People are going to get divorced. People are always going to get divorced. But how can we redefine success as doing that in a better way that supports the entire family and in a really authentic and whole self kind of way?
Yeah. I mean, you're really filling a gap that's so needed, you know, in society. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
It's been
Thanks for
great
having
speaking
me.
with you.
Good to chat.